Hey again, welcome back to the Simon game tutorial. So where we left off last time was that Simon was choosing his own buttons to play, and then you get your opportunity to play. We have the raycasts just to see visually what we're hitting. We have the Simon Game Manager, which manages turns and also records anybody who hits a button. So if the turn is 0, then it records Simon's turn, adds it to this Simon's turn object, and then here we're logging that out. But really what we want to do is we want to, well, we don't need to do anything there with Simon right now, but we do want to check what the player chooses once it's his turn. So we can do a quick log here. Simon has finished his turn. Now it's the player's turn. Now it's your turn to play. So then each time the player plays, we just handle this button pressed, which is any of the buttons on the screen get pressed. We can say, we can create a little integer here, int player button turn or button press at 0. So you want to check if turn equals 1, so that's the player's turn. Then we check if Simon's turn, and then player button press is equal, or we can do, because it's a string, equals, and then we want to say button object dot name. Now, because this is the player's turn, we're going to go ahead and say player button press plus plus, so that'll make player button press equal to 1 the next time. So the player has to basically press whatever button that Simon pressed in the same order, and this checks. And if it doesn't equal, so let's say here if it equals that, debug log, you hit the right button. Else, and let's organize this so it's on multiple lines, easier to read, legibility is important. Else debug log, you hit the wrong button. Game over. And here we'll say players button press equals 0, turn equals 0. And we could say number of presses equals 2. So always start out with 2. Okay. So there we go. Now it should attempt to match everything up. Doesn't match up. Let's say right here, turn taken equals true. Okay. And then we also want to check to see, we'll check this first, if player button presses or button press is equal to Simon's turn. Actually, instead of Simon's turn, we could say number of presses. Then the player has selected the right amount of buttons. So we could say that turn, and in this case, they must have gotten them all right. Debug log. Let's go ahead and put this on a new line. Excuse me. Debug log. Great job. You successfully repeated Simon's pattern. So then we'll say number of presses plus plus. There we go, and then we will return. We'll also say turn equals 0. And turn taken. Taken equals true. So now the turn taken allows us to check down here if the turn is 0 and not turn taken. So if turn taken is false, then we want Simon to take his turn. So here we go, we'll say Simon, let's do that in lowercase, Simon.take, wait a second, it's up here, Simon player take turn, number of choices, of presses. And then we'll just have an else. Else if turn equals 0 and turn taken, and we'll do this. So we'll do the same thing here. Well, let's wait on player's turn. Okay, we're almost done, I think. We're getting really close. We got to check for bugs, but go ahead and hit play here. So Simon's playing like crazy now, so you can see there's a bug. Excuse me. It's just not my day. I have a nice cold. So we'll make that public, just so we can see it in the editor. So the first time this turn taken is false, so if turn taken equals 0, and actually we want turn taken to be true here when we first start. So turn taken is true. There we go. Now we're waiting for the player. Hit yellow and then blue. Let's try that. Yellow and then blue. You hit the right button. Great. Now it looks like it hasn't switched over to Simon's turn now. So let's hit yellow again. It says, great job, you successfully repeated the pattern. So really, we want to check for one less. Excuse me. So what we're doing here is if player press is less than or is equal to number of presses minus 1. There we go. Let's see. We have green and then red. Great job, you successfully repeated Simon's pattern. So then it goes and sets number of presses to 3, which is right in the inspector. You can see that now. Sets the turn back to 0. It says turn taken to true. So actually we want to set turn taken to false. That's why Simon's not playing his turn now. So let's go ahead and replay. Alright, so we have red and blue. Red, blue. Okay, and now Simon's playing like crazy again. So we have another bug, but Simon did move on to 3 and Simon did start playing. So once this turn goes to 0 and turn taken equals false, it jumps in here. jumps in here, it says turn is equal to 0, and turn not taken is false. So then it does this, Simon player, take turn, but it never sets turn taken back to true. There we go. Alright, so yellow and green, yellow and green. So now Simon picked 3 buttons. Says great job, you successfully repeated Simon's pattern. Simon game here, button is pressed, red. Now you can see it says yellow, green, red. Now it's your turn to play. Well, we're not clearing the Simon selection here, or the Simon's turn. So every time we finish here, we got to clear Simon's turn. So let's go ahead and do that. Simon's turn dot clear. Hit play. So yellow and red. So then green, red, green. Green, red, green. I did something wrong. All sorts of errors. We're jam-packed with errors. So handle button pressed. Simon's turn dot add adds button. Simon's turn player button pressed. Player button pressed gets set to 0 when we hit the wrong button. Doesn't get set to 0 when we hit the right button. Player button press equals 0. Let's try that. Red, yellow, green, green. Huh. So really the logic to the game, there are 2 sides to this, whether we're the player or whether we're Simon. If we're Simon, we just add Simon's turn. If we're the player, we check how many presses the player's had. If the player pressed more than the number of possible presses, blue, green, blue. Okay, now you can see already that this is pretty hard because these buttons don't stay pressed very long. It's hard to tell if you're just watching up here. It's not too hard because I'm looking through the console, but if I were to look up here, they get pressed really quickly, and it's very hard to see that. So green, 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 yellow, blue, red. But let's start by slowing down the button animations. So we've got our button speed here. If I set that to 0.25, and then I've got to update my Simon game, or my Simon class, so that he's a little slower. Really, this Simon class should just be something that waits on the buttons and not necessarily just has a reference or its own time between turns. But we'll handle that a little later. So I'll do 1 second between turns right there. So that was a little better. There seems to be some logic error with the game over. You hit the wrong button. Player presses. We certainly need to clear Simon. So you can start to see here some code that we're reusing. Number of presses 2, you hit the wrong button, game over. Number of presses, player presses 0, turn taken equals, let's say false, because we're going back to Simon. So Simon.clear, number of presses equals 2, turn equals 0, player button press equals 0. And what are we missing? I think that might be it. So when we finish this, we might as well just return out. We don't need to increase the player button press here. But you'll start to see after you code this that there's a case for making a state with an enumeration as opposed to doing this if turn equals 1, if turn equals 0, which can be kind of confusing. So in some ways an enumeration makes it a lot more legible. So you can say if turn equals state.player or something like that. Anyway, we'll get into that a little later. Let's once we pick the right pattern, we want to do something like an invoke switch turn, and we'll wait 1 second. So invoke is just a way to tell Unity to call a new method, but to call it after a certain amount of time. So it's kind of nice if you have a time-based action and you don't want to fire it off right away. I'll just copy all that stuff in there. Okay. So this way, after I take my turn, I hit green, red, yellow. It waits a second before it goes. Yellow, blue, 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 yellow, blue, blue, yellow, blue, red, red, red. And we might want to make it a little longer. So let's say we make that instead 2 seconds. Okay, so I know another thing I did here was I modified the red button time. I didn't modify the rest of these guys. So these should all be 0.25. Let's go ahead and hit that. So green, red, blue, green, red. Green, green, red, blue. We can say we can have a public boolean. Public bool is our turn. Let's say off the bat it's equal to false. And if not is our turn, then we'll return. It's not our turn, return. Okay, so then anytime we switch turn to equal 1, we set player dot is our turn equals true. Anytime it gets set to 0, set to false. Set to 0. Now you can see here we are having to write the same code in multiple places. This is bad practice. So you can see that with the same code in multiple places you end up having to change logic multiple times, whereas if you had all the code consolidated into one method, you would not have to rewrite anything. So there are several different ways to do that, but first let me just check to make sure that this code works. I'm not sure if it works. It seems to still be firing off arrays. So we can check player. Let's see. Is our turn? Turns off. Now, is it our turn? Okay, turn. Is our turn is off now? You can't do anything, and it's waiting for us to play. So that's kind of sad. Is our turn is false? Switch turn. Is our turn is false? So here's the problem. So Simon turn taken. Once Simon finishes his turn, turn equals 0. And it says here if turn equals 0 and turn taken, and set turn equal to 1. Simon's turn count equals number of presses. Yeah, it's interesting. Turn taken equals true. Yeah. Well, so maybe, yeah, it looks like it is working. Blue, green, blue. It's off. So now we have blue, blue, yellow, red. Blue, blue, yellow, red. Yeah. I hit the wrong button. And after that, it should say that my turn is false. Okay, so now we have to play blue, green. Blue, green. Yellow, yellow, red. Yellow, yellow, red. Green, 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 red. Red, red. Blue, red, green, yellow. Blue, red, yellow. Okay. Blue, yellow, green, yellow, red, yellow, yellow, red, yellow. Boom. Okay, so the basic logic's there. Seems to be mostly functioning. Once you get something wrong, though, it's like Simon takes a turn immediately, which is pretty sure that we had set this once you're wrong. So this actually doesn't get invoked. The wrong button. So there's some differences here. We do want to invoke switch turn after you hit the wrong button, but we have some differences. So some things we need to abstract here, or at least remove. Oops. So we'll have number of presses right there. We'll take number of presses equals 2 right here. Those things are different. Player button press equals 0. That's the same. Turn equals 0. That's the same. Simon's turn dot clear. That's the same. Turn taken equals false. That's the same. Player's return is false. That's the same. There we go. Figured out the two differences. Let's save that. Now when you get something wrong, should green, 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 green. Green, red, blue, green, red, blue. Yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue. Yellow, red, red, yellow, 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 red, red. Alright, so I think we have basic gameplay down. We got our game manager Simon game script that works properly. It's not exactly cleanest code in the world, but it works. You can see we've got our methods here: start, switch turn, update, Simon selection, handle button pressed. We've got a number of variables or properties. And we've got our Simon class. Simon class just has take turn, press buttons, and log choices. Log choices was just kind of a helper method for ourselves. Buttons has an action or an event that fires off so that everybody can hook into. It has a speed that is public in the editor, so we can modify that. And has our animation script here. Finally, player. Got our player, which all that really does is sends out a ray and then fires off a button if it hits one. So that's it, 4 main scripts. And we've got our Simon, the base functionality of our Simon class working. Now, I'm certain there's all sorts of things that we could do to make this more interesting. But for now, I mean, this is really the primary game mechanic. So if we wanted to check and see if this was fun, maybe it's kind of fun right now. I don't know. It's an okay game. I certainly wouldn't pay for it, but it's an interesting game. I'm sure maybe kids would love it. But with some sounds, some better models, some text popping up telling you what happened, what your score is, I think this could be a lot more interesting. So we'll focus on that in the next tutorial. All right, see you then.